Hello, everyone. So sorry about the slight delay there. Just a couple of technical difficulties, which I'm sure we will get through very, very shortly. So thank you for joining today's session about where we've got guests from Engage Leeds to come and speak. So I'm just going to quickly pop open a very quick poll, which if you could just answer, that would be really good, just so that we can get an idea of which university you're from. And if you're a current student or a graduate, and if you're thinking of staying in Leeds when you graduate, it will really help us to be able to frame these conversations a little bit more in the future as well. Just after I do introduce our wonderful guests from Engage Leeds, I'll also be popping in the chat a feedback form. It would be really good to get your feedback from that and finding out what you guys thought of the of today's session. So thank you very much for the for completing that poll so quickly. So I shall now pass you over to Khalid from Engage Leeds. And hopefully Nicola, if the sound's working, and they will provide you with all the information you need to know about Engage Leeds, and then afterwards we can come together for questions. So if you do have any questions, please do use the chat or the Q&A, and we'll be able to pick them up. So Khalid, over to you.
Okay, right. Thank you, Tim. And yeah, good afternoon. And thank you very much, Tim, for giving us the opportunity just to plug Engage Leeds. But let's face it, some potential employees in the future or even volunteers now. So yeah, so just a bit about my role. I'm currently the pathway manager for Engage Leeds. So I manage the Engage service in the west of Leeds. And I also am responsible for managing the complex needs service, which works with people with sort of serious complex issues in terms of addictions, etc. There might be rough sleeping, or they may have been sort of, relationships may have broken down, and they need support to get into housing again. And I also manage the Ex-Offenders Project, which is a new initiative which is funded by the Ministry of Justice for 12 months to look at people who have not got priority with Leeds City Council to get into accommodation. So we support them moving into private accommodation and support them to get back into work or look at training just to reduce that offending rate. And at the moment, we're well below the national average. But I've not always been in this job. So that's why it's quite important to sort of share that. I originally started as a mechanic for Ford. I worked with them for many years, but I did not feel like I got the job satisfaction I needed from them. So on a night out, a friend of mine mentioned volunteering for Leeds Mind. And it's something I hadn't thought about, but speaking to him, it was, the way he spoke about it very passionately. I felt that was something I'd like to sort of more explore further. So I started volunteering for Leeds Mind. And I got the opportunities to sort of explore a lot of their projects, and I really settled with their housing project because it gave me the opportunity to go out and meet people in their homes, see what the problems were happening within the communities and within their homes. And within sort of 3 months of volunteering for Leeds Mind, I managed to get a job within that area as an assistant. Now that is a very entry level post, so it was learning and sort of getting that experience around what kind of issues people might be facing in the community. One of my mentors at the time told me that there's some key things around doing that particular role is that you have to have a non-judgmental approach and be really passionate about helping others. That's something which I really sort of emphasize with all the people who come to work for Engage now, in terms of that's part of the interview process. We try to sort of get from people how passionate they are about this field of work and their desire to improve the lives of others. So it's that's kind of mentality we're looking for with our employees. Okay. So at this point, I was going to hand over to Nick. Are you good, Nick? Okay.
I think I'm good. Can you hear me?
Okay.
Okay. Can you hear me all right, Caleb?
Yeah.
Ah. Sorry, I've literally just sorted my audio issues out, having to leave. So I'm Nick Rigdon, so also a pathway manager within the Engage service. And a little bit about my role is I do a very similar role to Khaled, except I look after our team that works in the east side of Leeds, so similar numbers of staff, but a slightly different specialism to some of the things Khaled alluded to. So I manage some specialist staff in relation to housing support for people with dementia who are living in our communities. So yes, in terms of my background, haven't always worked in housing, but I have done for around 20 years now. I finished a degree in health and community studies and was a bit aimless really in terms of what direction I wanted to go, as it wasn't really a sort of an automatic pathway to a particular role. And I wafted about doing sort of residential social work, care work, various different things, all about supporting people, until I decided I quite fancied to go in a hostel. And I did a few agency shifts to get a little bit of experience. And 20 years ago, started as a relief project worker in a family hostel that provided people with support 24/7, which was an amazing place to learn about housing and tenancies and tenancy law, but also just the skills you need to support people on a one-to-one basis. And over the years, I went on to manage accommodation-based services like women's refuge and family hospitals and things, in addition to a little bit of visiting support. And then eventually, sort of 5 and a bit years ago, was involved in the formation of the Engage Leeds service.
Okay, right. Thanks, Nick. Right, so who are Engage Leeds? So Engage Leeds are a consortium made up of 4 organisations. Our lead organisation is called GIPSIL, and they manage all the referrals. So we have one central point of referrals going in, and they manage that sort of that part of Engage. They also have specialist service who they employ, which are the advice and the employment services. So they provide, support around people's benefits, looking at people, moving into sort of employment, and looking at mainly training for people who we support. Then we've got Barca, who I work for, and then we manage the complex needs service and obviously the prison release project as well. And we've got about 70 people who are working with complex needs service at the moment. And we've got, within each wedge, we have 500 generic support people we're supporting as well. So in total, there's about 1,500 people we support citywide within Engage. But within it, I think one of the reasons we're trying to promote, so each organisation has got strands which you can volunteer in or have placements if you've got courses which you need to sort of have placements for. So within Engage, we've got a lot of community-based projects which will work in the community. We've got digital inclusion services, counselling services, which are all options for people to volunteer alongside the Engage service as well. And then we've got Connect Housing, who are a social housing provider and are, I think, more or less Yorkshire-based, I think. And then we've got Riverside, another housing provider, and also provides supported housing, which is a national organisation. So it's quite a big organisation in terms of support, and we're the only housing support service in Leeds. Originally, back in 2017, when it was formed, there was about 20 organisations which were providing that service, but now it's just gone down to one service, which we're able to share our culture a bit better rather than having 20 odd organisations doing different things. So like I said earlier, so the Housing Support Service was formed in 2017. Our capacity was 1,500 people any one time on the service, and we had one point of access for referrals, and any triaging is done there, and also then signposted to other services. So don't necessarily come into the Engage service when it's triaged. The main referral pathway are from third sector group organisations really, and Leeds Housing Options, and also adult social care. So they're the highest referrals we get. We also get referrals from the probation service and from domestic violence services. So it's a real wide range of areas we work in, and that's why some of the housing support workers need so many different hats and so many skills to actually sort of manage to work in this field. Main emphasis really is to prevent homelessness and to break down in tenancy, sustain accommodation and independent living, and then help people integrate into the community and just build some self-resilience. Right, so yes, we also, in terms of how we work, is that we have one IT system. So all the organisations share one IT system, so we can look at information and pass on information quite easily. And we have satellite offices where staff are able to sort of locate themselves, so that it reduces travel, and it also helps to integrate the engaged team on a wider basis. All staff are trained for looking at how to work through a trauma-informed approach, and looking at people's sort of strength-based approaches, and kind of sort of find some risk assessments, etc., and how to do sort of good support planning. So I think what we'll do is, if I pass that on to Nick now, in terms of to go through some of the specialisms, Nick.
Sure. So just as Khaled's indicated, we're quite a large service. Originally, when we were commissioned, we have the equivalent of about 108 full-time posts, but I think that's a little bit more with the additional prison posts as well. So I think it's around 108 now. And I suppose one of the benefits of having such a large service is we've got quite a big structure, which has really allowed for people to develop and move on. So I'll talk to you a little bit really about what the structure, what posts we have within Engage Leeds. As Khaled's mentioned, we've got the hub, which triages and processes all of the referrals that come in. And GIPSIL, in addition to having a hub team leader and some hub workers, also employs some advice and employment specialists. And then you've got 3 wedges. I work in the East Wedge as a pathway manager, Khaled in the West, and then our South partner, Riverside, also has a pathway manager. And what our teams look like in each of the wedges is fairly similar. We have either 2 or 3 team leaders, in addition to some 2 senior housing support workers. We have the equivalent of around 16 full-time housing support workers, some of which our staff are part-time, so it's a few more bodies in there. In addition, we also have up to 5 full-time posts that are assistant housing support workers or trainee housing support workers. Each of the wedges do it slightly different. Each of the providers, we have a couple of apprenticeship posts where people are doing a 2-year post at Connect, for example, learning to be a support worker, but also getting a qualification in housing. Our partner Riverside uses their own in-house system to do that, called Grow Trainees. And then, in addition, as Khaled said, each of the partners brought a real strength, a real specialism, which makes our partnership work so well. So we all employ some specialist posts based on our own expertise. And what we do is we share those specialist posts across the service. So, for example, Connect employs 6 housing support workers that specifically work with people with dementia or dementia symptoms. So that includes people maybe who've had brain injury or stroke. So you might not automatically think of them as having Alzheimer's, but they do have memory and retention issues, which obviously impacts on the day-to-day life. And we employ 6 of those posts, and 2 of them work in my team, but 2 work in alongside Khalid's team, and 2 work in the South's team. So that model is replicated for all of our specialist posts. So we integrate them into one of the wedges. So we have our dementia posts, as I've mentioned. We also have a housing navigator, which is looking at the more complex cases that we have with people with really multiple enduring needs who struggle to engage with services. We have 2 advice workers in each of the wedges who work on the trickier side of benefits, and things where they've got to tribunal or mandatory reconsiderations. We have an employment worker in each of the wedges. And then we also have a peer support and volunteer coordinator in each of the wedges. And that peer support and volunteer coordinator might manage up to 20 volunteers in each of the wedges. So at full capacity, we have up to around 60 volunteers that also work alongside our paid staff. Some of the training offers that each of the partners within our partnership offer, volunteers can also access that training as well throughout their volunteering placement with us. So what we find is, because there's quite a decent structure in there, we have movement. So we have examples of people who have started as a volunteer, who've come into the service as an assistant, or even straight to a housing support worker, who have then been able to progress into senior, hub, team leaders, etc. We also have sometimes people who move from a generic housing support worker role into one of the specialist roles. Okay, so as I've mentioned, volunteering is a huge part, and we do often have a lot of university students that have volunteered and will continue to volunteer within the service. It really supports, alongside academic learning, the sort of practical skills. It provides some additional learning opportunities in terms of what it looks like on the ground to actually support an individual who might have some vulnerabilities or some difficulties. And the volunteering is matching volunteers with the individuals who want to volunteer. So we try and match skills and interests and obviously commitments from any of the volunteers as well. But it's a great way to get a bit of a flavour and a bit of insight, especially into any type of supporting role. And sometimes it can be a befriending model. It might look like you're, somebody who's very isolated and vulnerable, who really struggles to get out, struggles to engage in anything that might improve their mental health. And I mean, a really random example might be, we had a client, for example, who was very vulnerable, had a lot of physical health issues, loved playing chess. He had nobody to play with. Our volunteer used to go and play chess with them once a week. Now, obviously, that person gained a whole raft of things beyond just the chess game, the socialisation, the talking about common interests, etc. It was hugely beneficial. Anybody who comes to work in the service, we have an established mentoring and buddy programme. So new staff are all allocated a mentor that will show them the ropes, be that additional go-to person beyond immediate line managers, etc. All of the partners are committed to a good learning and development programme. So if people have interests in particular areas within the service, shadowing opportunities is pretty much the norm if that's what people want. And we quite often see that for people who are keen to move into one of the specialist posts as well, that you have the opportunity to spend a bit of time with what that role looks like, and increase your skills in that area as well. There's obviously, as I said, opportunities to progress from volunteering right through to pathway manager. But I guess one of the benefits of Engage Leeds is it is a consortium of partners, and we deliver other services, as Khaled had alluded to. So I work at Connect Housing, which is a social landlord. We let about 3,000 homes across Leeds and Kirklees. So there are sometimes people who've come into Engage Leeds as a support worker that might actually then show an interest in working more within the mainstream part of our business, which is the housing side, whether that's property management or lettings or HR or finance. So, you know, it opens doors to a wider world. And we also have a number of services across in Kirklees which offer supported housing. The other sort of elements around what are other opportunities our partners might offer are gateways into things like addiction support services. Barca's the lead partner within the Forward Leeds consortium, which supports people with addiction issues, or offender management. GIPSIL, our other partner, is specifically set up to support young people and care leavers, so they have a range of services that do that. At Connect Housing, we're also a huge supporter of the GEM programme, and I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this, but this is specifically a graduate programme that is about upskilling leaders of the future, where you can, and I think we have around 5 GEM employees within the organisation at any one time. So where you're doing a practical job, but also studying to be a leader of the future. Our workforce is hugely diverse, and the work is really diverse, as Khaled alluded to. With a jack of all trades, people have to have a housing need to come to our service. But the range of services that we work alongside to help meet people's needs, because housing, and somebody's lack of ability to manage the housing, or the reason they're potentially at risk of homelessness, is often caused by a whole raft of other things, whether that's around somebody's mental health or physical health, whether it's because they've been experiencing pressures that are because of domestic abuse or addiction, or, we support people with these issues whilst we're trying to support them with their housing needs as well. So we get a really good flavour of a lot of the statutory services and what they offer, such as health and social care, obviously in and amongst all of the services and providers that work in our areas. So within the east of Leeds, there's a massive amount of support services to help people when they're struggling. Each of the partners all offer competitive salaries. We're all mindful employers. And I think because of our structure and because of right through from volunteers onwards, lived experience is hugely valued. So I suppose I wanted to give you a little bit of feedback, really, in terms of a couple of things that people have told us who have either volunteered or have been a client of Engage. So there was a volunteer that I think is still volunteering with us now. The staff were really friendly and welcoming. You could tell they were all so passionate about their job. I have learnt skills that I will use for the rest of my life. And I would say that in my role as a pathway manager. And this was a client talking a little bit about the impact of having a volunteer within Engage Leeds. I couldn't have asked for a better volunteer. I've been well matched with an intelligent young woman who knows her stuff. She keeps up to date with my needs and understanding older people. She prompts me if necessary, but in a kind way. I'm lucky to have her. And I think in terms of some of our paid roles, So as a support worker, a client said, the support has literally changed my life for the better. My life is less stressful, as I was in a mess, not knowing where to start and what to do next. However, with the help that was available, it took some load off me, hence I was able to focus a little bit. My life has 100% turned around. I've not now got somewhere to live, away from domestic abuse. My support worker has been so helpful and it has made a massive difference, and my life is now back on track. So thank you. Yeah. So I think the reward of seeing somebody, sometimes at the worst when we first meet them, where they're in crisis or they're struggling to see what to do to try and make an improvement, having somebody like one of our staff members go out and just help listen first, but help put some structure and a bit of a plan together about what's important to deal with first and move forward. And it's all with the client's input, and seeing the difference that makes over the course of however long you work with them, to a point that they actually feel safe, they feel resilient, and have a better future. I can't even begin to tell you how rewarding that is. And I do have a case study if people would be interested in me just giving a bit more of a flavour. How are we doing for time? I don't want to skip any time left for questions if there are any, but I'm happy to summarise one.
Doing absolutely fine for time. It'd be great to hear the case study.
Okay, great. So part of our reporting, because we are funded by Leeds City Council to deliver the Engage Leeds service, there's a whole raft of data and outcomes and what have you that myself and Khaled are often buried in, but it's really important because we want to demonstrate how important the service is. And a huge part of that is we, with clients' consent, produce case studies, because I think that really gives the flavour of actually what this work looks like on a day-to-day basis. And this is a case study of a 64-year-old person, is gentleman. He was in a one-bedroom flat on the upper floor. He had actually been referred to Engage before, but he didn't engage with us literally very well. He had historical alcohol issues. He was referred by Citizens Advice because they were concerned about his debts. But again, even though they'd given him some advice, he hadn't really followed through on that because of his health issues and his alcohol dependency, but also some concern around some memory issues. He'd actually had a stroke about 13 years ago. He had some physical health issues with pins in his leg, and he needed further surgery. And he felt quite anxious and quite depressed. And an additional barrier, he also described himself as illiterate. He was unable to read or write. He could pick up very simple short sentences with a bit of time to kind of figure out what it's saying. But of course, all of those issues meant that he was missing things. He was missing letters, appointments, and he was getting into all sorts of bother. He felt quite embarrassed, the fact that he couldn't really read or write effectively, and he didn't like to ask his family and friends. He had a rent arrears because he hadn't updated his universal credit claim, which meant that they weren't paying the full amount that actually he would have been entitled to. He didn't have access to a smartphone, and obviously this was also critical for him to keep his benefits information up to date. He did have a bit of a support network. He had some couple of sons and some grandchildren, but he was regularly borrowing money from them because he was struggling with his debts. He used to get PIP, which is a disability benefit, but that stopped several years ago. And again, probably because of his inability to go through the assessment processes and attend appointments. He was really struggling with the stairs. Obviously, it was a physical challenge. And he really needed accommodation on one level. So he came with a bit of a backstory, but strengths wise, and we do always start with this, he was quite an independent person. He loved to spend time with his friends and family, and many of the people we work with actually don't have a support network. He tried to keep himself organised, and he did use certain skills to try and do that, but obviously not enough. Things like he'd use your audio to remind him about certain things. He obviously drank, and he was accepting of the fact that this was impacting on his life, but there was a willingness to change. So we talked about what he wanted for the future. Obviously, a ground floor property was going to make things significantly easier for him to manage again. We needed to look at his budgeting. He wanted to budget better. He wanted to be reducing his debt. He wanted to see if he was entitled to the benefits that he got before, and he wanted his anxiety and depression to improve. He also, his long-term goal was to reconnect with his father, who he hadn't seen since he was 7 years old, when he left Jamaica to move to England with his mum. So we do talk about the wider aspirations, because it's about the steps that are going to help him get there. He obviously had a lot of barriers, and these were some of the things that we were going to try and help him move past. So there was a whole raft of stuff noted in his support plan. We needed to help him register with housing. We needed him to help him get an assessment to look at his own needs from the independent living team. We needed to support him to try and apply for some of these properties as they were being advertised. We needed to help him with his debts. We needed to help him with his universal credit and his PIP application. We were visiting him regularly, and the great thing is he was engaging with that, which obviously was key to success. We referred him to a number of services, including money buddies. We liaised with his GP around a memory test, and we tried to support him to attend literacy classes. We also were liaising with his family at times, because we wanted him to be more open about the difficulties, because at the end of the day, we weren't going to be there forever. And we wanted them to be able to understand and support him without him feeling embarrassed. And then obviously, if he did move, we were going to help him with that change in circumstances. So I'm pleased to say this guy was offered an adapted 1-bedroom bungalow. It had a little garden, local shops and amenities. And one of the first things we did was informed his landlord around his literacy issues. So there was an agreement that they'd contact him by phone first, rather than always just banging out letters. We contacted all of the new services he needed to register with him, such as his utilities and change of address for all of his benefits. We requested, with his consent, his new rent to be paid to his landlord. We helped him with a new PIP application, and initially he was turned down, but we helped him appeal this, and he was then entitled to that benefit and got around a £2,000 back date. We consulted with the hospital staff in relation to his appointments, again around setting up a system where he wouldn't miss them. We worked through with his budgeting. He was referred to money buddies, and he engaged with them really well. He had a memory test, and we supported him to go to the hospital where that happened, and he obtained a diagnosis that accepted that he had dementia symptoms. We helped him liaise with occupational therapists. We helped him liaise and apply for various grants to support getting him some new essential furniture that he needed when he moved. And towards the end of support, he had his leg operation, which actually helped make him mobilise. He continued to use his phone to record his important appointments and dates, but unfortunately, the one thing we didn't achieve is he did not want to attend literacy classes. But he had a more open relationship with his family and his friends that helped him with some of the things and checked in with these things, and he no longer felt embarrassed. So it was life-changing. And this guy, you know, had a history of not engaging with services very well. I think primarily because he felt embarrassed around his literacy. So lots of changes, lots of support, but somebody who's now managing independently. Thank you. So I think we open it up really. If there's any questions that you want to know about the service, about the roles we have, about the work we do, feel free to ask any in the chat, and we'll hang fire.
Thank you, Khalid and Nicola. That was really good, and really enjoyed that case study at the end. I thought it was quite a poignant one as well. So please do put your questions in the Q&A. So just for people who are on this webinar today, and maybe some who are joining via video, the types of entry-level roles, what type of things do you guys really look for in someone who wants to enter those entry-level roles?
Well, I suppose it's around really sort of expressing a passion about work, supporting people, and I think that's a key thing when you come into this role. It's that passion for helping people, just having a bit of patience and just having that sort of emotional resilience, because you'll come across a lot of challenging people, a lot of people with some serious health issues or mental health issues, which at first glance can be really worrying. And I think that's something which you need to sort of prepare yourself for. But we offer support and training to people, sort of, orientate people to sort of, understand some of the conditions. And just that desire to sort of, help people improve in their lives, it's just, that's really key. And be a really good communicator and a really good listener, and I think that's some of for a support worker, that is absolute essential. And then, there's no formal qualifications. It's really how a person is, how you are to be a really good support worker. I don't think qualifications will help in how you interact with somebody. That just comes naturally for some people, and that can be, we especially our assistant housing support workers who've not had any experience. They'll go out with a housing support worker and sort of observe and shadow what's going on, and how, some days, work is so easy, everybody's engaging and it's not a problem. Sometimes people's trauma will impact on them, and it's a different from each day, each week. You might find that person behaving very differently. So it's how you respond to that, how you build that rapport with that individual is really key. And that you have to understand, some people have been through services like the police and prison, and they get told what to do. You really need to be more person-centered. You have to listen to what the person's saying and understand the trauma, and how you interact with them. Rather than, we have a rule within Engage, is that the paperwork side stuff does need doing, because commissioners want that. But it's not the first thing we need to do. First thing we need to do is to understand and, build that rapport with that individual, and just make sure they feel that the support is there, and it's not going to be a one-off thing. It's going to be a regular thing until they don't need us anymore. Nick, if you want to add anything to that?
No, I think one of the reasons our partnership works, these 4 partners that have come together to deliver the Engage service, is we all had similar values. So we're all very value-driven organisations. I think you can't do the sorts of work that we do and not feel that that's a huge priority. So even people who lack experience at level entry posts, we are very much tailoring interviews to people's values, what makes them tick, are they aligned with our organisations, around being person-centred, around trying to improve the homes that people live in, the communities that people live in, and values with good questions shine through in interviews. So I think that's the only thing I would add, and that's why our partnership works so well.
Fantastic. And I guess like listening to some those kind of skills and qualities that you do look for in people. I think if people listen to the alumni session that was on earlier on today, you'd hear that, you know, taking advantage of those learning situations is where you can develop that during your degree. One question which has come in is, and I guess it's more of a summarising question, but what if there are any placement or volunteering opportunities, in what kind of areas are they?
So, well, in the West with Barca, there's a number of areas you can, you know, volunteer for Engage. That's you know, you can have a placement here. It's not a problem. I mean, it's unfortunately we can't take lots of people at the same time. So, you know, it'd be very limited in terms of, you know, how many we could take. But within our young people service here in Barca, there's volunteering opportunities. Within the Workwell sort of employment service, there's also options, and within our communications teams, you know, there's options within that as well. So, like I say, one organisation, there's a lot of opportunities for sort of volunteering or having a placement, or, you know, if you need to fulfil some kind of course criteria. So, and you know, on the main, it's usually students who have come to Engage, and we've had 2 students, I think, from Trinity originally, and both have got jobs as a result of having the experience from here. So they're working with Forward Leeds.
Thank you. And I think the final question really is, where do people go to find out more and potentially look at those volunteering and entry level opportunities that are available?
Sure. Well, most of the Engage jobs in the West will be on the Barca website. So it's yeah, don't mistake it for Barcelona, because everybody keeps ringing here, think we're affiliated to Barcelona Football Club. We're not. It's Barca Leeds. So it's BARCA Leeds. And usually most of the jobs will be on there. But if anybody wants an informal chat, you can just, you know, I can drop you my email. And you can share that, and if people want to have an informal chat around roles, I'm more than happy to do that with them as well. But on the Engage website itself, there's also, that's where the jobs are advertised, and any kind of volunteering opportunities, etc., are all on there as soon as they come up. I mean, we've just recruited, you know, in the last month, 3 people have just been recruited, and there's more opportunities within Engage for jobs. People have just finished uni or and are looking for them opportunities. Yeah, Nick, does Connect Housing have their website?
Well, like Khaled said, you know, they're on the Connect Housing website for any posts that we have available. So I immediately before here was writing interview questions, because we have one post of a housing support worker. So they'll always be on the Connect Housing website. But in addition, like I say, we try and make sure they're on the Engage website as well, and direct it to whichever partner is the actual employer of that post. But the Engage Leeds website also just gives you, there's a whole section there around volunteering and who to contact if you're interested, etc. as well. And there's a bit of information obviously about the service and what that work looks like, etc. and some case studies, some further case studies on there as well. So it's a good place to start, engageleeds.org.uk.
Thank you. It is a great place to start. And if you're anything like me and always snooping around looking, trying to find opportunities in Leeds for graduates, and if you're on LinkedIn, your HR teams or whoever does your promotion on LinkedIn is really good. I think Barca posts things almost weekly for people to get involved in, and similar with Connect Housing as well. So if you are on LinkedIn, give them a follow. That's definitely something I would do. So Khalid and Nick, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it this afternoon. It's been really useful and enlightening to hear about the great opportunities with these organizations and where your career can go, especially for a graduate. Please don't forget to fill in the feedback form, which you should be able to find the link to in the chat. The next session will be tomorrow now. That's 11 o'clock with Leeds 2023. So please do tune in for that, and we look forward to seeing you all for tomorrow. But again, Khalid and Nick, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
Take care.
Absolute
Bye.
pleasure.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.